Hello.
Hello.
Hello, that's a very strange sound.
It's the sound of the Zoom echo. That's a very specific sound. We're very used to it in my office.
How are you?
Hey, Catherine. Hey, Art.
Hi, Amanda.
Britton, were you in my neighborhood today?
I was posting signs. I should have waved at your house.
Both Faustine and I were on the phone, and she was like, and Faustine is looking at that house, and I'm behind that house, and Faustine's like, somebody's putting signage out in that house. And so I'm like, in the window, we look like, you know, whatever, Mrs. Kravitz. I'm like, who's in the window? I'm all confused. I'm like, that's Britton. She's like, that doesn't look like Britton. We're on the phone, mind you. Like, we could see each other.
That city lady again, putting signs in people's yards. Yeah, I was posting notification signs for the next Harc meeting, which so for the most part people do that themselves, but once in a while, just to make sure we don't miss any notice deadlines, I grab a hammer and go run out to people's yards. It's actually one of my favorite parts of the job when I get to assist.
Hey.
Hey, Terry. Welcome.
Thanks.
Hi, Terry.
Hi. How are you?
For some reason, my picture went away. I'm not sure why.
I have to pick a good seat in my house where the camera will not be aimed on a mess. So it's very limited right now.
Now, this has something to do with the pandemic and sheltering in place?
No, it's my husband.
Ah,
Call
okay.
him.
I thought you were going to blame the children.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Whatever.
She did blame the children.
Yeah, thank you.
Exactly.
But I do tend to miss us gathering, and I hope that before the end of the year that we will be able to at least come to what we thought was norm as a commission.
Agreed.
If we get to do that, I will dress up with literal bells on and show up in city council chambers all decked out. I would be very glad to see y'all there again.
There's a lot of plexiglass in the city council chambers from watching council.
There is, and I would probably have to wear the mask that you can best hear me through, because that microphone is not ideal. For most people, it's probably not ideal when you're wearing a very thick mask. So I'd have to have my Harc speaking mask, which I'm totally fine with.
Okay, Nat, do we know yet if we're having everybody this evening, or is Mirna on the call?
Best I can tell, best as to my knowledge, everyone is going to be present tonight, unless Britton knows differently. And Commissioner McCabe was on the dais last week, so it will be Miss Mitchell tonight.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate those in the public who have joined us. if you have any questions about how the meeting is going to be run, I don't recognize some of the numbers, but we appreciate you being here. Amanda will welcome and open the meeting and give some participation guidelines for you to be able to participate in tonight's meeting. But if you have any questions, please feel free to use the chat function in the Zoom. You can also raise your hand as a public, and if you are joining by phone, you should have the ability to mute and unmute yourself, and I have that same ability here. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you. How's everybody doing?
Good.
So I think we're just missing Carol Lee. Is that correct?
I believe Commissioner McCabe is also not present yet.
Okay.
Ms. Parr, you do have 7, including yourself. So correct me if I'm wrong, Britton and Myrna, but I do think whenever the commission is ready to get started, you do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you, Nat. We'll go ahead and get started, and you can just let me know if anyone else joins us by chat or however. Okay, good evening. Good evening. The time is 6:01 p.m., and I would like to welcome everyone to our meeting of the City of Georgetown Historic and Architectural Review Commission. The Historic and Architectural Review Commission, appointed by the Mayor and City Council, is responsible for hearing and taking final action on applications for certificate of appropriateness based upon the City Council adopted Downtown and Old Town Design Guidelines and the Unified Development Code. This virtual meeting format is different from the regular meetings at City Hall, but we will still follow a similar meeting format. We will consider the cases scheduled for this meeting individually as follows. Staff will make a presentation of the case, and then I will give the commissioners an opportunity to ask questions to staff. After the staff presentation, the applicant or their representative will have up to 10 minutes to present or provide comments on their project if they choose, followed by questions from the commissioners. Once staff and the applicant have addressed questions from the commissioners, we will open the meeting for the public hearing. If you would like to provide comments on the agenda item, please wait until I open the public hearing. When I open the public hearing, I will ask if anyone would like to speak. And if you would, please unmute yourself and state your name. Once we have the name of everyone who would like to speak, I will call the names in order. And when your name is called, you will have up to 3 minutes. A speaker may allot their time to another speaker for a maximum of 6 minutes. If you wish to allot your time to another speaker, please indicate so when I open the public hearing. Please remember that all comments and questions must be addressed to the commission, and please be patient while we organize the speakers during the public hearing portion. You also have the opportunity to provide comments through the Q&A section of the chat room located on the right-hand side of your screen. Please provide your full name and address for the record, and your comment will be read by staff. After everyone who has asked to speak has spoken, I will close the public hearing and provide a few minutes of rebuttal time to the applicant if they so choose. Following this set of questions, I will ask the commissioners for a motion and a second, followed by deliberation and any additional questions to staff or to the applicant. Then I will call for a vote on the motion. If the applicant or a member of the public has questions or concerns following a vote on an agenda item, please communicate those to the recording secretary outside of this meeting so that staff can follow up with you. You can provide your contact information through the Q&A section and request follow-up. You can call the planning department at 512-930-3575, or you can email historic@georgetown.org. I would like to remind everyone to please state your name before you make any comments. That includes staff, commissioners, applicants, and members of the public. who speak during the public comment portion of the meeting. If you're a member of the public, please also provide your address. The first item on our agenda this evening is item C. Let me get back to that slide. So this is approval from the minutes from the August 11th Historic and Architectural Review Commission. I will entertain a motion.
Catherine Morales, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Do I have a second?
Faustine Curry, second.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes as written. I will call for your votes. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Hyde.
Approve.
Commissioner Curry.
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston.
Approve.
Commissioner Morales.
Approve.
Commissioner Browner.
Yes.
And Commissioner Mitchell.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. That motion carries. Item D is a public hearing and possible action for a certificate of appropriateness for 2020-34 COA. Britton, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Britton Bostick, Downtown and Historic Planner for the city. And just to check in, can everybody see the beginning slide for this case, 2020-34 COA?
Yes.
Yep.
So Commissioners, this is a request that y'all heard in your last meeting on the 13th, and this is coming back to you mainly because we had one additional item that we needed to notice for and have a public hearing for, and so that's what we're here to accomplish this evening. So I'll go ahead and read the caption though. This is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for, in addition to a street-facing facade, a 5-foot 4-inch setback encroachment into the required 25-foot street-facing garage setback to allow a residential structure 19 feet 8 inches from the side street or south property line, a 4-foot 6-inch setback encroachment into the required 10-foot rear or west setback to allow a residential structure 5 feet 6 inches from the rear or west property line, a 2-foot 9-inch setback encroachment into the required 6-foot side or north setback for lot 5 to allow a residential structure 3 feet 3 inches from the lot line, an 8-foot 0-inch building height modification to the required 15-foot maximum building height at the rear or west setback to allow a building height of 23 feet 0 inches at the rear west setback, and an 8-foot building height modification to the required 15-foot maximum building height at the side or north setback for lot 5 to allow a building height of 23 feet at the side or north setback. And this is at the property located at 1610 South Church Street, bearing the legal description of lot 5 in the south part of lot 4 of block 4 of the Logan addition. So this is just reiterating all of those things. What we have before you, Commissioners, and this is the house here on slide 4. This is a request for a garage addition to a house that is on South Church Street. It's a medium priority structure surrounded by other medium, also low and high priority structures. I realize show this house is visible in the 1916 Sanborn map. I showed the 1925 map last time, but didn't realize that the 1916 map went so far south, and so we see it here without the garage that had been there. And then in 1925, we can see the garage that had been constructed. This house was built in about 1912, 1913. And then we can see by 1925, there had been more development in the area. The 1964 aerial photo helped us to understand that this was originally a 1-story house. It's now 2 stories. The 1974 aerial photo was kind of blurry, but similar to 1964. And then we can see the 1-story version of the structure here in 1981. So there's some photos there. So a lot of things have been retained. A lot of things are the same, but a few things are different, including the addition of the large dormers, which gives this house a 2-story height and that second floor. And then what we had looked at last time, Commissioners, was that there are some large trees in the right-of-way and a city kind of manhole cover that would really effectively prevent it being very feasible to place a driveway closer to the house. And so the applicant is requested to replace the existing, this is a non-historic carport. This is a newer carport built by a previous property owner. But to replace this carport with a carport, new carport, storage behind, it would have a paved driveway, and it would have a second floor living area. And so when we looked at this, one of the comments that the commissioners had made was a request for additional information on the drawings. The applicant has provided that. But I wanted to, because we have so many different pieces to this, I was hoping to try to better highlight what the request is. And so this is a request that has 3 setback modifications and 2 building height modifications. And I tried to illustrate that on the site survey to show where those things are taking place. So the carport would require a setback modification because that's currently required to be 25 feet for this from the street, although this would not be a further encroachment than already exists. Also a setback modification for the rear property line, the west property line, and a building height modification there. The existing carport is already along that same line, so it wouldn't be a further encroachment, but it would be kind of the back part of that structure would be 2 stories in height, which is the need for the setback modification. And then the dash line kind of through the middle of the drawing is showing the lot lines. And last time we had talked about, this is a lot and a half. And so the main structure is sitting on top of the lot line, and our setbacks apply to the lot lines. And so just on kind of for technical reasons, there's a setback modification and building height modification request so that we can have that carport be 3 feet 3 inches from the interior lot line, although that's kind of specific just to this property and not to adjacent properties. And so we had a proposed plan that showed a breezeway connecting that to the house to comply with our UDC requirements. We had received some elevations, and then those elevations have been updated in accordance with the commissioner's request. Y'all had asked for notations on what materials are proposed to be used. And so what we can see in the updated drawings is labels showing shingles to match the house, which is kind of the dark gray asphalt shingles, hardy siding with the board and batten style, low E vinyl windows, wood stairs, landing and railings, and then a garage door at the rear of the carport for the storeroom. And so just showing the context, this is a house that is surrounded by mostly 1-story structures, but a little further out there are 2-story structures. There are also 2nd-story additions with dormers, kind of a similar look to this house. And so as is usual for Old Town, this is kind of a neighborhood with a lot of different styles, different time periods. And so when staff had reviewed the application, and this information is not changed from staff's previous presentation, when staff reviewed the application, we found that it complied or partially complied with applicable design guidelines. And then when we reviewed the setback approval criteria, also found complied or partially complied. In a couple of places, the criteria weren't applicable to this. And then does not comply is because the size of the proposed addition is different than similar structures within the same block. Staff was not able to identify where this had previously been done. And so that's the reason that that was listed as it does not comply. The commissioners have additional modification approval criteria for building height modifications. And so staff found that the ones that applied to this particular request either complied or partially complied. Most of those criteria are for the town square district or the downtown specifically and didn't apply here. And so we sent notices out last time for the last public hearing. Those same notices were put out again. 2 signs were posted, 40 letters were mailed. Staff has received 1 comment in favor, and hopefully the commissioners received a copy of that today. We had also previously had 1 comment in favor, but those are 2 separate comments received for the 2 separate public hearing notifications. And so staff's recommendation is also the same as it was last time. This time we were just including recommendation for approval of the building height modification on that interior lot line. So to sum up staff's recommendation, it's approval for the addition. Staff is recommending approval for the setback encroachment for the carport and the setback encroachment for the interior lot line. And staff is recommending approval of the building height modification for the interior lot line. Staff did think that the length of the breezeway, understanding there are some kind of site constraints there, Staff did think that the length of the breezeway and the distance from the house was a bit long, and so is recommending denial of the request for the setback encroachment for the rear property line to make that structure have to be closer to the house. And with that, the building height modification would still be needed, but it would be a lesser building height modification. It would go from 8 feet down to 5 feet. And so you gave me feedback last time about wanting the COA application number with your motion. So I've updated those slides and hopefully that helps. And as usual, commissioners, you have options when you make a motion: to approve as presented by the applicant, to deny as presented by the applicant, to approve with conditions. And if so, if y'all could be specific about what those conditions are, so we can get that recorded correctly, and then to postpone. Although I think it's important to note here that at the very latest, a decision on the request would need to be made by the next regular Harc meeting, because decisions have to be made within 35 days of a public hearing, and we did have the first public hearing on August 13th. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer questions, and the applicants, the property owners are in the meeting and they are available to answer questions as well.
Thank you, Britton. As you said, the applicant is here, as well as I think John Lawton is here. Do either one of you all want to make any type of presentation or add anything to what's already been said by staff?
Want me to unmute here?
We're here.
Hello?
Hi, Steve, are you there?
Yes. Laura's here. Yeah. Wait a second. We got two different iPads because I was making sure that things would work right. Hold on a second. We're here to answer questions.
Great. So if you turn the volume off on Laura's iPad, then you can use your iPad to address the commission. That way there's not the feedback on our end.
Okay. Wait a second. Okay, just left on that one. Can you hear me now?
We've got you just fine. Does the
Can you hear me now?
Yes, Steve, we hear you.
Mute. Hello?
Steve, we can hear you.
Now, Steve.
No,
It's
it's
on
on.
mute.
Yes, sir.
Oh, my Lord.
Ms. Parr, I believe they said they were here just to answer any questions that the commission may have. So I think we can move forward to any questions the commission has.
Okay, thank you. Okay, commissioners, what questions do you have for either staff or for the applicant?
Madam Chairman, is the applicant agree with the conditions that has been presented?
Go ahead.
Steve, were you able to hear that from Commissioner Johnston? He's asking if your thoughts on the proposal made by staff.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Okay,
Okay, can you hear me?
we can.
Okay, this is John Lawton.
Hi, John.
How are you?
Great.
The only thing which I think the applicants are really not sure of is the reason just to move the facility or the building over the 4.5 feet as opposed to leaving it where it is, for the main reason there already is a driveway that's been cut in, and to move it over just that small amount doesn't seem like something that really is an issue. So I think that's what they're basically wanting to protest. It's just what the staff has asked for.
Okay, thank you, John. Steve, did that answer your question?
Yes, ma'am, it did.
Okay, thank you. Britton, would you like to comment on that from a staff perspective?
Sure. So the reason why, and so there would be kind of needing to figure out how to shift the driveway. Staff acknowledges that. Our concern was just that we don't normally have breezeways this long to accomplish meeting the UDC requirements, and so the recommendation was really based on that. Staff certainly understands and agrees that there wouldn't be a further setback encroachment. We have seen 2 letters in favor from surrounding property owners that received notifications. And so our recommendation stayed consistent. It was really about moving that structure slightly closer. But having discussed it with the property owner, they did express a desire, and this was expressed in our last meeting, they had expressed a desire to retain as much of the yard open as possible. And leave that space because gardening is a hobby and an interest, and they have been working on that garden and are trying to stay within the footprint to the extent that they're able to do.
Britton, I think you also mentioned, if I may just add, that accommodating would also, moving the driveway would also have an impact to the height request. Is that correct?
Yes, so it's not the full structure, it's not the full footprint that would be the 2 stories, it would just be the rear portion. And so that wouldn't be kind of from the street, it wouldn't be 2 stories, it would be one story up the street and then 2 stories further behind. But then it was also to, if you were to shift that building closer to the main house, it would reduce the needed building height modification. And so there was kind of a way to make that a little more gentle of an encroachment on surrounding properties. But as we've seen, we didn't have any comments from the adjacent property owner, at least so far. And so staff certainly understands that. But it was kind of what we saw as an option that would be available, but the commission certainly has the opportunity to make their own decision on this. And that's why staff makes a recommendation only.
Okay, so just to clarify, Britton, for my own, so you're saying that moving that a little bit closer to the house eliminates the need for the additional height in the back of the structure?
It would, so if you imagine, and if I might, I will go back to, I'm on slide 22, showing the new elevations provided by Mr. Lawton. And so if you look at the image on the left, this is what we're seeing from the 17th Street view. So we're looking at a carport, and then set back from the front of that carport is the 2nd floor addition. On the left-hand side of this drawing, you can see elevations provided giving height. And so building height for us is, with these gable roofs, is the average of the eave and roof height. And so if you can imagine, if you were to move that 2nd story portion away from the property line, because of that gable roof slope, the height of the building becomes shorter as you kind of move that angle away from the property line. And I don't know that I'm doing the best job describing it, but without the setback modification on the rear property line or on the left side of this drawing, you wouldn't need as much of a building height modification. You would still need a little bit of one because it would still be at the setback. You just wouldn't need the full 8 feet that staff had calculated. So.
Okay, thank you. What other questions do we have for staff or the applicant?
I have a quick question. This is Terry Hyde. Are the elevations what was added since last time? I thought there was a specific question about materials that Carol Lee posed, and I didn't see the difference, but I may just not be paying close attention enough.
Sure. So great question. I'm going to go back to slide 21. And so this is showing the applications that were initially provided with a sketch of the carport garage structure. And then going to slide 22, they had noted, Commissioner Nunn had asked about, can you show the materials so I can understand where the materials would be going, what all of these things are. It was difficult to tell from the drawing. And so those details have been added with notes to show this is going to be a shingle roof to match the existing house. The use of hardy siding, which is fiber cement composite siding with the board and batten style, and then vinyl low E windows. And so those notes have been what was added to the drawings.
Okay, and so thanks. And so you're proposing that, or you're just saying the breezeway is very long, and you said it's 36 feet. Is that right?
Approximately, yes.
And so what staff is recommending is that it would be how many feet with the staff proposal?
About 26, 25
Okay.
and a half.
Okay.
So not a substantial difference, kind of in the overall length. And but hopefully, I'm on slide 19, and so hopefully looking back at the site survey kind of helps to show if you took that red rectangle and shifted it to the right as oriented on the slide, that would to where it was kind of, you've got a little bit of a white strip down the left side of that red box. If that strip were about doubled, then that's where staff is proposing for that structure to be constructed.
Okay.
Already made in the.
Okay, Mary, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. The applicant, I think, would like to make a comment. Is that Steve or John?
It's Laura Cook. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
As far, from what I understand, if that red line was, that border was moved over, there's a tree that you can't see. There's a big maple tree, or it's an oak tree actually, that it would I think it would get in the way. the breezeway, yeah, see it? Oh. Yeah, and then there's a curb cut already there that would, if we had to change the driveway, that was just a brand new, street and curb that was just put in, that would have to be changed. I thought last time it was not the problem of, because the structure is already existing and it's been there since, the turn of the century. I thought that we were mainly looking at the materials, that you wanted to know what kind of materials we were using.
I was just asking the question, just getting it straight in my mind since, it's been a couple weeks.
Right, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, are we talking about moving the whole thing over?
So yes, I mean, so basically the application, so we postponed from last week,
Right.
for 2 weeks ago. And so we are now reviewing the entire application in totality. Since notifications were made on that on August 11th.
Right. So just, I'm sorry, I'm just like pathetic, but I'm just, what we're talking about is moving the whole structure over away from the that back lot line, right? So that the breezeway wouldn't be so long. Is that what the biggest issue is, the breezeway or the height elevation?
I think both of those are what we're discussing, what is most appropriate for the project in totality. I think that's what we're trying to determine is whether that is of concern or not.
Well, if it helps at all, we have talked about, we're not married to the breezeway, if that would help at all. I mean, we don't have to have the breezeway. I guess that would be one way to get around not having it too long. But I guess I missed what John had said because we were being technically, children.
Amanda, this is Pam Mitchell. Can I ask a question of Britton?
Sure.
So the breezeway, is that the length of the breezeway in and of itself is not a violation of any of the guidelines or inconsistent? Is that correct?
Correct. So we do not have any specifics on or guidelines that specifically address that connection. And the reason that that is part of this design is because our Unified Development Code, what we call the UDC really frequently, will only allow accessory structures or structures that are detached from the main house. 25% of the footprint of the main house, or sorry, the size of the main house or less. And so the size of this house does not allow for an accessory structure as large as the one is being proposed. The only way that that would be allowed with our development code is for it to be attached or connected to the main house. And so what we have seen previously is an attachment via a roof structure, which we frequently call breezeways. They're constructed without walls. They're using columns, usually a paved walkway in between as kind of a covered path between the main house and the accessory structure, which oftentimes has a garage or carport component, maybe also some storage, maybe also some living space. And so this is something that we have seen in town. This is something that we've certainly seen in Old Town, but the only way for an accessory structure this large to be constructed is for it to be constructed as an addition. And that's where that breezeway comes from. And so usually when we see those connections, they're shorter in length. But there's nothing that we have that prohibits what the applicant is proposing, as long as Harc votes to approve the setback and building height modifications that would be part of that request.
Okay, thank you. And then part of your suggestion for shortening the breezeway, which would also then move the accessory structure, is so that the pitch of the accessory structure is lower and the variance with the height, the variance being asked for is less than what is being proposed. I'm sorry, the variance that you're suggesting would be less than what is proposed. Is that correct? Did I get that right?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct. And so instead of 3 setback modifications in total, staff is proposing 2 setback modifications, and there would still be 2 building height modifications, but one of those would be 5 feet instead of 8 feet.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
If I might, I can't help but bring up the fact that that breezeway under number 5 of the UDC 3.13.030 of the criteria, that breezeway, however, the length of the proposed breezeway is not consistent with the historic character of the site. Shortening the breezeway would, in my opinion, and I think as has been espoused, would make it unnecessary for us to have to deal with 2 different setbacks. To me, the heartburn I've got is the length of the breezeway, which is not consistent with that historic site.
Okay, thank you, Art. Britton, for clarification for the applicant, because she asked that, so removing the breezeway and building a structure that is not connected with the breezeway would require them to probably go back and revisit this at a different time. Would that be correct?
So to remove the breezeway, the size of the carport garage living structure would have to be reduced. And so that would cause a need for a redesign.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that that was understood, that this would need to be, they would need to redesign and come back to Harc for approval. Correct?
Yes. And so, and it's because our development code limits the size of accessory structures. They can only be so large if they're detached from the main house. They can only be 25% of the size of the main house. And so building it as an addition to the main house or a connected structure to the main house is what would be needed in this case, and we've seen it in other cases as well.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to clarify that. Okay, does the applicant, yes, Terry.
Sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead, Terry. Sorry.
Okay, Britton, is there a slide that may show the view to what would be the breezeway from the road? Or would we have to do a Google Earth landing?
That is a great, so from kind of an aerial view or from
the street. from the street.
I'm on slide 15, and so slide 15 shows the back, kind of behind the house between the carport structure and the main house right now. And on the far right of slide 15 in the photo, you can hopefully see a red rectangle, and that's the door that the breezeway would start at. So if you took that door and built kind of this covered walkway between that door and the new structure, which is proposed to be exactly where this current carport and storage is, if you can imagine a covered breezeway between those two, that's where the breezeway would go.
Okay, thank you. That helps me visualize.
Okay. Is there anything that the applicant, was any response to any of that or anything else you'd like to comment on?
It's Laura Cook again. Yeah, the breezeway is not a problem. I mean, we would like to have the shed and the small apartment, and that's moving the whole structure might not be feasible for us, but the breezeway is definitely not a problem for us. I'm not sure if that's
You mean having the breezeway?
Exactly, right. Yeah,
Otherwise you lose that big tree. And
yeah, because the breezeway actually saves the yard and saves the tree and saves the curb cut and another tree. So that's what it does, and I think it can be designed so it looks, it's not going to look like a covered hallway. I think it will, be, designed nicely.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
So,
go ahead.
I'm sorry, it's Pam. I just want to be clear. So if the breezeway goes away, then we need to look at the proposed accessory structure because it's more than a quarter the size of the house. Is that correct, Britton?
Yes. And so Harc is not able to approve projects that don't meet the UDC requirements, and where you do have the ability to modify the UDC requirements are in setback, building height, and floor area ratio limits. So Harc has the opportunity to modify those. That's one of the powers granted to Harc by the City Council. But on the size of accessory structures, Harc doesn't have an ability to do anything other than what the code limitations are. And so I would have to go back to the square footage, and I apologize, commissioners, for not having that right in front of me. I would have to go back to the square footage and check, but I think they would be limited in size with the detached structure to 600 square feet. And I say that because I believe the main structure is around 2,000 square feet, and I could be wrong. I would need to double check that, but I think it's around 2,000 square feet. So if you look at 25% of that, that's approximately 500 square feet. What the code does allow is for up to 600 square feet if you're building a 2-car garage, which also extends to a carport. So that would essentially give them the room for the carport portion. It would not give them the allowance for the storage area or for the second floor living area if they did not connect this and construct this as an addition technically. Did that answer the question?
It did, thank you. And the length of the breezeway and the moving of the structure and the driveway and potentially impacting the tree is to mitigate one of the variances, the request for variances. But anyway, actually, that's not a question. That was me talking to myself. Sorry about that.
Well,
So,
and I think on slide 15, the photo that we're showing, this is just a little bit of a different condition. And so staff's recommendation doesn't want to not acknowledge that this is kind of a different condition and that there are a lot of things between the existing carport and the main structure. It's just staff believes that the carport feasibly could be located closer to the house. And so the setback modifications are one of the things that Harc has the ability to modify So normally you would be required to construct a new structure, and that's what's being proposed, a brand new structure. So all new structures are required to meet the zoning requirements, which is a 10-foot rear setback, a 25-foot street-facing garage setback, a 6-foot side setback. And so Harc has the opportunity to modify those things because sometimes in the historic districts, those setbacks are not the best fit for a property or a project that's being proposed for a property. And so y'all do see quite a few setback and building height modification requests, kind of pursuing what we might call better outcomes for historic properties. And sometimes, and one of the setback modification criteria is the ability to save trees or to preserve landscape features or other important features. And you can see we do have 2 large trees that are not on this property. They're in the city's right of way. And so they're the city's trees. And so I think there is some kind of importance in considering the trees and how close a driveway or a structure would get to those root zones. And then also, you know, in terms of like, could you move the driveway closer? Putting it between the 2 trees would be pretty difficult because of the location of the city manhole cover. And that kind of would create this like really big bump in the middle of a driveway that wouldn't be ideal. And I have not spoken to our engineering department about it, but I don't know that they would be much in favor of that, to be honest.
Okay, any other questions or comments for staff or the applicant?
Yes, I had.
Okay,
I'm just curious, if the building has been there since like 1925, does that have no bearing like on, you know, whether it can stay? I mean, if you.
Gosh.
Is that John?
I don't know.
Harc hasn't been there since 25.
You know, I think obviously we have to evaluate the project based on, you know, what's being added to the project. And so that's what we're taking into consideration.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions or comments from the commissioners to staff or the applicant? Okay, if not hearing any, this is a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing. Nat, do we have anyone signed up to speak on this item?
No, ma'am. There are members of the public who are participating by phone, but no one has contacted me. Myrna is also on the line. I do not believe anyone has contacted her to sign up to speak.
Okay, thank you. Okay, not having anyone signed up or in the chat to speak, I will close the public hearing. And I will ask one final time, do we have any other comments or questions for staff before we entertain a motion to move forward? Okay, then I will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve 2023-4 COA as presented by the applicant.
Okay, so as presented by the applicant. Thank you for that thank you for that clarification. Do I have a second? So that's a motion by Terry Hyde. Do I have a second?
I second this, Steve.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve as presented by the applicant by Commissioner Hyde and a second by Commissioner Johnston. I will take a vote. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Hyde.
Approve.
Commissioner Curry. Approve. Commissioner Johnston.
Approve.
Commissioner Morales. Approve. Commissioner Browner.
No.
And Commissioner Mitchell.
No.
Okay, motion carries approved. What was that, 5-2? Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you all for joining us who are on the phone.
Thank
All
you.
right. We're going to move on to switch back to my agenda. I'm sorry.
Oh my gosh, we got lucky.
We're moving on to item E.
Did you hear me, Britton?
Ah, I'm sorry, you might have been muted.
Okay, yep, I got it. Item E, public hearing, COA 2020-39.
Commissioners, Britton again. This is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for an addition to a street-facing facade, a 10-foot setback encroachment into the required 25-foot street-facing garage setback to allow a residential structure 15 feet from the side street or north property line, and a 7-foot 6-inch building height modification to the required 15-foot maximum building height at the side street north setback to allow a building height of 22 feet 6 inches at the side street or north setback at the property located at 1403 Ash Street, bearing the legal description of 0.497 acres out of the northwest part of Block 8 of the Hughes Addition. And so the requests before Harc tonight are an addition that creates a new or adds to an existing street-facing facade. This is for a 2-story garage addition, a setback modification, and a building height modification. And so here is the house at 1403 Ash Street. This one, I hope commissioners, you had the opportunity to read the history that staff provided. This one was a really happy surprise for me. I was familiar with the history of S.O. Eidman through other research in partnership with Southwestern University. We had been trying to determine where Mr. Eidman's building downtown had been. There was a photo, but we weren't able to figure that out. It's still a little bit of a mystery, but in the process, I came across a narrative that Mr. Eidman had written, and it turns out that this was the block that he owned. So this is at the corner of East 14th and Ash Streets, just behind First United Methodist Church. This is a medium priority structure, and it's kind of close to our University Elm National Register Historic District, just south of Highway 29 or University Avenue. And so on slide 6, I have got the property that's this application highlighted. But what I'd like to point out, commissioners, if you go to the opposite corner, kind of the lower right-hand corner of this block at the corner of East 15th Street and South College Streets, that is the Eidman house. It's a high priority structure. You see it marked in a dot in red. There are 2 high priority structures, 1 dot on the left of the block and 1 dot on the right. The one on the right, with kind of the very light colored roof, right behind where it says South College Street, that's the Eidman house. But at one point in time, they owned this entire block. And in his history, Mr. Eidman wrote about his 2 acres, and he had planted fruit trees, and it was kind of a wonderful firsthand account of early Georgetown. The Eidmans moved here very late in 1879. He wrote a little bit that was not very impressed with Georgetown at the time. And Mr. Eidman was part of the First United Methodist Church construction. He was also part of bringing Southwestern University to Georgetown, and one of the members of the group that started the Georgetown Waterworks. And so I did not realize that this house had been theirs. We can see it in the far left of slide 7. This is the 1916 map, so you can see there were a couple of other houses on this block, but this is something, by 1916, the Eidmans had moved. They had gone to Bay City, Texas, kind of back to the coast. I'm not sure why. He didn't really address that in his narrative, but by 1916, they were no longer on this block. Another house had been built on the southwest corner. And then we see the 1925 and 1940 maps as you move to the right. Pretty similar looking block, but you can see that things began to develop as time went on in this area. In 1964, this is why I so much enjoy having this map available, or excuse me, this photo available to us. In 1964, we can see what looks to be a rear addition in approximately the same place that this garage is proposed to be constructed. And so with the case that you just heard, the application, the request that you just heard, we know that for a very long time, there was a garage structure on that same property in the same location. And this was a little bit of a surprise to me, because I was able to see that it looks like there was a structure here too. I'm assuming it's a 1-story structure, and I would assume, because of the location of the driveway, I'm assuming that this was a carport in 1964, and it looks like it was still there in 1974. I'm not sure when it was demolished, but I'm just making an assumption. I don't have photos from the street view or other photos to verify, but I think this might have been a one-story carport at the rear of this historic structure. And so here's a current photo. This is a very large lot. It's about a quarter of the block. And so typically we have larger houses on these quarter blocks. You can see directly across Ash Street, a larger house that's on a larger bit of the block as well. This one, I believe, was constructed by the Eidmans. They bought this property in 1880, shortly after they arrived in Georgetown. Mrs. Eidman actually bought this property. And so I would think, based on the deed records, based on what I'm able to understand, I think the kind of the front rectangle of this house might have been the original structure constructed not too long after they purchased the property. And I think there were kind of two additions made. You can see kind of these two roofs, these two gable roofs that extend behind the portion that faces Ash Street. And I think those might have been later additions. The Eidmans were known to host a lot of guests. They had boarders, people who lived with them for rent, who were either attending Southwestern University or professors at Southwestern University. And they seemed to just have very kind of busy social lives. And so I would not be surprised if they had built this house as a house to rent or to let, or to perhaps even host their guests. Can't confirm that. Mr. Eidman didn't clarify in his narrative, but this seems to have been a house that's been added onto a couple of times over the years. And so the applicant is requesting a garage and living space above. This is also proposed to be connected to a breezeway. And I think it's important to highlight, commissioners, and you see the markings on the drawings. This was made by staff. When this had originally been proposed to us, the applicant was not requesting setback or building height modifications. They had met the 25-foot setback requirement and had proposed something that met the UDC requirements. I did speak to them and said, is this what you want to propose, or Harc does have the ability to consider a request to modify setback and building heights? And the reason that I brought that up, commissioners, I think you can see in this drawing, in this instance, if the structure, the addition, were to meet the setback and building height requirements, it would peak out. It would be taller than the current portion in the main house, but it would also peak out from behind it, from the right, if you're looking from Ash Street. And so with the setback modification, that would move the structure closer to the street, that's true, but it would also be able to bring the structure in line with the main house instead of peeking out from the right. And so that's why that's part of the proposal. When I mentioned that to the applicant, the property owner, they had said, yes, let's please go ahead and request that from the commissioners. And so that's why you see the notes for the proposed change. So this would be a separated addition also connected with the breezeway. This is showing to be 21 feet 8 inches to provide some of that separation. And then also commissioners to help kind of use the existing driveway that's been there for, from what I can tell, quite some time. And so looking at the setback modification, staff thought it was important to kind of help illustrate where that would bring the garage, since this would be 10 feet closer to the street than our code currently requires kind of by default. And so what you see are red lines that show where that setback line would be. The lower line is on the subject property and along their side of East 14th Street. And then I added another line on the north side of East 14th Street to kind of show a comparison. So what we can see is that some of the houses are set back about 20, even 25 feet from that street, but there are really only 2 houses that face onto East 14th Street. The other houses face onto Ash Street and onto College Street. So we're seeing their sides and we're seeing their side garages. And there's a house you can see on College Street that has a street facing kind of detached garage that is also kind of located closer to the street as this one is proposed to be. So once again, with Old Town, we kind of see a mix of conditions that have developed over time. This is the proposed elevation for the Ash Street, excuse me, the East 14th Street view. And so you can see that this would be taller. This part of the addition, this would be taller than the existing structure. And so you would probably be able to see it from Ash Street behind, but if you're looking from East 14th Street, this would kind of be visible the way that you see it portrayed here. And then the applicant has provided also other elevations. They've provided a floor plan, a roof plan showing what that would look like. So it's a simple gable roof style with 2 stories, kind of simple windows, some siding that is not the same as the main house because currently that has asbestos siding and we don't install that anymore. So they're also here showing the breezeway connection and then giving a breezeway example showing kind of an indication of what they were picturing and wanting to propose. And then also the applicants provided floor plans so that you can see there would be a garage, laundry, and kind of gardening room on the first floor and then a living space on the second floor accessed by an exterior wood stair. The applicants also provided a selection of the materials that they would like to use. And so this includes fiber cement siding with the lapped profile and then also garage door, windows and doors. And then the deck and stairs are proposed to be this fiber composite product also with this vinyl railing and then asphalt shingle roofs to match with a kind of a carriage house exterior light fixture. And so looking at the surrounding properties, they're really a mix of sizes. There are other properties that have detached garages that face the street or face the side street. There are 2-story structures, there are 1-story structures. It's really kind of a mix. And so this is an area that has some really large houses that were built around the time that the Eidmans owned this property. And it's kind of fascinating to think that they owned at one point an entire city block that had maybe 2 structures on it, possibly 3 by the time they left. I haven't done that research, but that was a time that some of these larger houses were also being constructed and then some smaller houses were infilled as some of the portions of these large lots were sold off over time. And so when staff reviewed the application, we found that it complied or partially complied with the applicable approval criteria. The sign plan was not applicable because no signage is proposed. And then when staff looked at the setback approval criteria, we found that it complied or partially complied. And then in some cases, criteria were not applicable. For instance, there were no large trees or significant features to be preserved as part of this request. Also for the building height modification, staff found that most of the criteria didn't apply because it was really kind of focused on our downtown, but the one that did apply did comply. And so 2 signs were posted, 32 letters were mailed. At the time of posting this agenda, staff had not received any public comments, but this week we have received 4 comments in favor of the request. And so staff recommends approval of the request for the addition for the setback modification and for the building height modification. And here is your application number as well as your options for a motion. That concludes my presentation and I'm happy to answer questions. Also, the applicant, I believe, is in the meeting with us.
Okay, thank you, Britton, and thanks for all that great history. That's always so interesting to find out what's happening in our great community. The applicant, would you like to make any comment or anything you'd like to add that staff has not gone over?
This is Cheryl Canfield, and I appreciate all of the historic background and information and very nicely presented.
Thank you very much. We'll see if you'll just hold, we'll see if the commission has any questions for you. So commissioners, what questions do we have for staff or the applicant?
I have a question. This is Pam Mitchell. So the height of the addition is taller than the main house, and and I see that there's a breezeway. And my question is is the massing of the addition comply with all the guidelines, and if not, which ones? And if not the breezeway, then, and I guess that's the whole point of the breezeway, is that it's being viewed as an extension of the house. Is that correct?
So this is kind of, I could call them all unusual ones. So what was different about this is when I was looking at the existing house and when I was looking at what was proposed, I was looking at what would be the opportunity to do this as an addition. So we have other instances in Old Town of a second floor addition. being built onto a one-story house. And so I wanted to look at that. And from a massing standpoint, and this is where there was a little bit of a challenge, and hopefully I can make sense of this. And I think I'm gonna back up to this slide. So when the property owner had proposed this design, I was looking at, it's a corner lot, and this house is constructed kind of particularly close to the street corner for a lot of such a large size. And that's really what got me started looking at the ownership history, trying to get some sense of why this was. That's why I think the Sanborn maps are really helpful, because it helps set the context a little bit. Normally we would not see a house this small, so close to a street corner on such a large lot. And when I looked at this house too, and looked at the way that that roof is constructed, there is not a great way to add an addition directly to this house without using that breezeway connection that would not also require a removal of a great amount of the roof that's been built. And so when I talked earlier about, I believe the original part of the house was very likely this front rectangle facing onto Ash Street. And then you can kind of see two horizontal lines in this photo on slide 10. Those are the ridge lines of the roof for the two portions that I believe were added later, and they had a porch in the middle of them which has a flatter roof. This is not ideal. This is not something that, it's why I believe that there were later additions, because I'm a little bit challenged to think that somebody had designed the house originally to be like this with all of these different roofs. And so in order to add an attachment directly to the house to the rear, which is how we would normally imagine an addition to be, you would have a real difficulty getting all of the roofs to work out without also disrupting the existing historic structure. And so the applicant mentioned in their letter of intent, they would like to do some remodeling and some improvements to the main structure in the future. I would imagine that probably looks like new siding and maybe addressing some of the roof issues. But as far as having something that fit behind the house, it is 2 floors, but to directly connect it to the house the way that we normally see an addition, I don't know that that is something that I would prefer, because I think it would really disrupt this particular structure. And so if the alternate is to have some separation so as to very lightly touch the existing structure, even though it's taller in comparison, it's 2 stories instead of 1 story, I think that would be my preference given the condition of the roofs of this house. And I hope that that makes sense. And if not, please let me know.
It does. Thank you. I appreciate your perspective.
Thank you.
Britton, also, I can't get back to, because I'm looking at your proposal right now, but we always talk a lot about that the addition should be smaller than the main structure. Can you remind us what the main structure square footage is and then the addition square footage?
So this is one where the main structure is about 1,300 square feet. Again, it's not very big. And so the addition is a little bit more than that. I think it's around 1,600 square feet. And so it would be roughly double in size, although the footprint would not be as big because it's 2 floors. And so that's where, sometimes looking at what is proposed and then what is the existing structure, sometimes an addition looks really large, especially when you compare square footages. And in this case it is, because it's more than double what's there existing now. And I think that's where, what our code requires now doesn't necessarily always provide the best fit for historic homes. And so I think that's why Harc has some flexibility in their approvals, like setback modification, building height modifications, to see kind of what is the best outcome. And so when I was looking at all of the different pieces of the request, looking at the history of the site and looking at the location and design of this house currently, as much as that is a larger addition, you'll also see in the letter of intent what the owner and her daughter are expressing is kind of their desire for their use of the property. And so altogether, it seemed like a good solution, and one that if if this house were surrounded by other smaller houses or had some similarities, and this would be out of character with other structures in the neighborhood, I think that context is really important. I think that context is always important. And here, though, there is just a mix of houses, some that are about the same size, and then some that are much larger that are even immediately across the street. And so as far as it being out of character with the surrounding properties, staff just didn't think that it was completely out of character. And especially because some of these surrounding structures have either detached garages or connected to garages or kind of other large additions that have been put on the site later on.
Okay, thank you. And now you answered my other question, which was going to be, in driving by the property, it does appear to me that there are other structures around the property, other homes that have similar, you know, either detached garages, detached garage with an addition on the top, some connected by breezeways and some not. So you would concur with that?
Yes, and I think there's certainly room on this lot to increase the footprint of you know, through an addition. I just think that this is an option that very lightly treats the existing house and retains it intact. And because I suspect that this house is much older than the Historic Resource Survey estimated, the date on there was 1900, but I think this house, at least the original portion, might be as early as 1880s. Early 1880s. I can't confirm that, but when I realized who had owned it and when they came to Georgetown and began to connect that history to the Eidmans, I just think it's likely that this house is older than we suspected. And sometimes those really older houses, especially if this was not their main house, if this was used as a rent house or other property like that, it would have been really small, which is kind of funny because there are other surrounding houses that are very large. And so, Old Town is just a mix of things that have happened over the last almost 150 years, which is wonderful. And it creates some situations that in all the time that we've been doing this, and as old as our Old Town Historic District is, it's kind of amazing to me that we continue to see situations that we've not seen before. And so this one was a little bit new for me, and just trying to look at as many aspects as we could when staff was writing the staff report and evaluation. And so still continue to think that it is taller, it is by square footage, it is larger, but because it treats the main structure lightly and doesn't disrupt it and kind of leaves it intact for either kind of future very considerate projects or kind of uncovering some of the layers of history there, staff just thought that this might be a good solution for that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments that we have for staff or like the applicant is on the phone? Okay, not hearing any comments or questions. This is a public hearing, so I'm going to open the public hearing. Nat, do we have anyone signed up or in the chat to speak?
No one has signed up to speak. Myrna is also in the meeting. I don't believe she has gotten any requests either.
Okay, thank you. Not having anyone signed up to speak or comment, I will close the public hearing. And I will ask one more time, do we have any final questions or comments on this item before I will entertain a motion to move forward?
Madam Chairman, this is Steve. I move for approval as presented by the applicant.
Thank you.
Second.
Second.
Morales.
Thank you, Catherine. Okay, we have a motion by Commissioner Johnston to approve as written and a second by Commissioner Morales. I will take a vote. Commissioner Parr, approve. Commissioner Hyde.
Approve.
Commissioner Curry.
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston.
Approve.
Commissioner Morales.
Approve.
Commissioner Browner.
Yes.
And Commissioner Mitchell.
No.
Okay, that motion carries 6-1. Thank you all very much. Thank you to the applicant that was here. Appreciate your input tonight. Okay, we're going to move on to item F, which is a public hearing and a COA 2020-29. Britton.
So Britton again for our final case tonight. This is a public hearing and possible action on a request for a certificate of appropriateness for new signage that is inconsistent with an approved master sign plan or applicable guidelines at the property located at 806 Rock Street, bearing the legal description of 0.08 acres out of the east part of Lot 1, Lot 49 of the city of Georgetown. And so there is a two-part request with this. One is for signage that is inconsistent with an approved master sign plan or applicable guidelines for Harc, and then other signage that is consistent with the guidelines for the HPO. And so commissioners, what happens is that staff has the authority to approve signage that meets the design guidelines. But if signage does not meet the design guidelines, either size or illumination, we bring it to the commission for their review and decision. And so this is the building. It's right down the street from where I'm sitting right now. This is just on the other side of the library from me. This is at the corner of Rock Street and 8th Street. And so you can see it's just off the square, not one of the blocks immediately surrounding the square, but directly west of that, sitting on that southwest corner of 8th and Rock. And this is a low priority structure surrounded by medium, high, and then also non-contributing structures. So we do have the Georgetown Public Library has not been designated as a contributing structure yet, maybe one of these days. I thought it would be good to remind everybody what this building used to look like. And so if you are fairly new to Georgetown or just did not drive by this building very much back in 2011, this is the 2011 view. And so I'm not exactly sure where this building came from or why, but it originally had a rock facade and then wood windows, and this is what it looked like. And so very different from what we see today. And so the request is for a new business that is opening up, Karina's Bridal Boutique. This is a business that's currently headquartered in College Station, Texas, and they're opening their second location here in Georgetown, just off of our square. So they're asking for signage. And the reason that we're coming to the commission is because our design guidelines allow for one primary sign and then additional signage for a business, and there are usually size requirements on that. And in this case, the applicant has a building. This was kind of originally set up for 2 tenants. They are taking the entire building, and so they have 2 entrances facing 2 streets. And our design guidelines are really focused on, at the moment, our design guidelines are really focused on signage for buildings with 1 street-facing facade, and they just happen to have 2. And so what the applicant has proposed, and this is the HPO review part or the staff level review part, is a primary sign over their Rock Street entrance. They are addressed at Rock Street, and this would be a 32 square foot sign. This is not illuminated. It's a sign with basically like kind of vinyl. It's very one-dimensional. And so no light behind it, not a lot of depth to the sign piece itself. And then a blade sign, which would be 4.5 square feet at the corner to kind of get the attention of passersby, since the facade signs are proposed to be flush with the face of the building. So something that would be a little bit easier to see from down the street or up on the square. So these 2 signs comply with our design guidelines for illumination, for size. The applicant is also requesting a 3rd sign, and this would be over their entrance off of West 8th Street. And this is the one that's coming to the commission for review and decision. And so the other 2 signs are within the design guidelines for size, location, etc. But this 2nd sign that the applicant is requesting is what Harc is going to need to review. And so, like I said, normally we look at buildings that have a single primary entrance or face only 1 street. In this case, this building faces 2 streets effectively. So they had provided 2 options for the signage. One on the left is 24 square feet in size. It just has the business name. And then one on the right has the business name and also an image kind of indicating that this is a bridal boutique. That second image on the right, the option 2, that's 32 square feet, would be exactly the same as the Rock Street sign. And so what staff is recommending is kind of a combination of things. The building is 60 feet wide on both the Rock Street and 8th Street sides, which allows them a total of 60 square feet of facade signage for kind of one facade. And so one could look at it as, well, they have two 60-foot facades, so they could have two signs of up to 60 square feet. And that would be one way to look at it. The view that staff has taken traditionally has been to kind of use that kind of pick one street-facing facade as that, and then that's your total allowed. And so the reason that you see staff's recommendation be for the smaller size sign off of West 8th Street is because that all of the signage combined then would still be within the size requirements of the design guidelines. And so that's what staff recommendation is based on. If you look at the street corner, we have other signage for other businesses that has a lot of similarities. A lot of the signage is non-illuminated. These are very traditional facade signs that are kind of simply created and simply installed. And so the proposed signage staff felt is consistent also with surrounding signage. And so that's why we made the recommendation that we did. So when we reviewed the application, we found that it either complied or partially complied with applicable guidelines. Criteria 6 did not apply because no new buildings or additions were being proposed. And so 2 signs were posted. Staff has received no public comments. And so staff is recommending approval of the request for the proposed second primary sign with the 24 square foot size, although the applicant did provide 2 options, one for 24 square feet and one for 32 square feet. Staff's recommendation is for the smaller or the 24 square foot size. And so this is 2020-29-COA. Here are your motion options. That concludes my presentation. I believe the applicant, the business owner, is in the meeting. And so we might check to see if they have any additional information to provide.
Thank you, Britton. The applicant, if you're here with us, we're happy to hear any additional comments that you would like to make on your signage.
No additional comments. We will, I think on that proposal, it shows option 1 and option 2. Option 1 is what we wanted to go with, or what we would if allowed. I think we're going to hold off on the blade sign for a while. So that's really not relevant. Yeah, so what we really wanted was that option 1 as the secondary facade side and sign, and that would be great. That would meet our needs. We also had never seen that 2011 photo, so yikes, we're getting over that. But I think once everything is said and done, I think the building will look great as proposed. And I'm not sure if Britton mentioned, but that the garage door is being changed to a storefront window too. So the overall storefront curb appeal of that building is going to look fantastic when it's done.
Thank you. I do have one question. You said that your preference is option 1. Is there a particular reason why your preference is 1 as the business owner?
Just a smaller sign. That's not the main entrance. So the main entrance is going to be the side that faces east, which has that one with the Jeep parked in front of it right there. So that's the main entrance. That other side is kind of an entrance to what you could call the showroom, where the dresses will be, kind of where walk-in traffic would kind of pop their head in the door. So we just wanted to differentiate between the two. So that option 1 right there, as shown on the screen, is what we would prefer for that side.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that that your preference would be that the signage would be a little bit different on both sides. That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah.
What other questions do we have for staff or the applicant? Okay, not hearing any questions. This is a public hearing, so I will open the public hearing. Do we have anyone signed up to speak on behalf during the public hearing?
I'm not seeing any of the participants who are in the virtual audience have raised their hand or unmuted themselves. And I don't believe Myrna has gotten any requests to sign up to speak to this item.
Okay, thank you, Nat. Okay, commissioners, any other comments or questions? And if not, I will entertain a motion. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to close the public hearing. Not having anyone signed up to speak, I will close the public hearing. All right, now questions, comments, final reflections, or I will entertain a motion.
This is Pam Mitchell. I make a motion to approve the application as presented.
Thank you, Pam. Do I have a second?
This is Harc, and I second.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion to approve as presented by Pam, seconded by Commissioner Browner. I'll take a vote.
Commissioner Parr, just want to make sure that it's clear for staff. I know it's probably clear for the commission, but we're talking about option 1 for
Correct.
the second sign. Okay. And
That was
it's
my intent.
also clear for the commissioners in their motion that should the applicant decide they would like a blade sign in the future, that Harc believes that's also appropriate. And is that right, Britton? Am I tracking the request correctly?
The blade sign is approvable by the HPO with the size that it is. And so even if the applicant chooses not to install it, they could still be approved for it, and they have 24 months to apply for a sign permit before that approval would expire.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nat, for that clarification. So the motion is to approve the signage request with option 1 as that request. I'm going to take a vote. Commissioner Parr, yes. Commissioner Hyde.
Approve.
Commissioner Curry.
Approve.
Commissioner Johnston.
Yes.
Commissioner Morales.
Approve.
Commissioner Browner.
Yes.
And Commissioner Mitchell.
Approve.
Okay, that motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much. And thank you for the applicant for being here. Good luck with your new business. Okay, item G, we're going to move to staff updates. I don't know if that's Britton or Nat tonight.
I'm sure we can tag team it. I did want to just give you all an update on the small area plans. Remember, in council directed earlier in July that the staff work with the neighborhoods to develop a small area plan. And we have small area plans. One of them is the downtown master plan. And we are working with the San Jose neighborhood, which is down in Southeast Georgetown, as well as the Track Ridge Grasshopper. And Sophia couldn't join tonight because she's actually on another Zoom call with the TRG neighborhood right now. On Monday, we walked 91 address points in the San Jose neighborhood and completed some surveying with the residents there. Our initial survey with the residents is to discover what some of the issues are. Very happy to just share with you in an unstatistical or I don't even know how to say it, but non-statistically speaking, the feedback is the neighbors are happy to live where they live. There's a sense of pride and neighborly care for each other. When asked if they felt safe in their neighborhood, they all answered positively. There's a lot of pride in the history of that neighborhood in terms of families that have lived there generation over generation. There are some cases where 3 generations are still living together. And it was a really great experience to walk the neighborhood with Ms. Calixtro. Staff participated, so we had even the communications department was out there. And we did have a handful of Spanish-only speakers, but we did make all 91 addresses. So we're looking forward to them sharing with us the remainder of their survey results. We are hitting the streets on Saturday to go through the Track Ridge Grasshopper neighborhood with representatives from that neighborhood. They're on a phone call right now, finalizing the coordination for that. There are over 400 address points in the TRG neighborhood. And so we look forward to stopping and talking with residents and gather some feedback from them. We should have all the survey results from both neighborhoods back by September 7th. And we will then take a little while to look at those survey results and understand them, but then come back to the council at the end of September, beginning of October, once we've confirmed that we have the right project scope. And then following October meeting, with the council and the neighborhoods, we'll then start trying to recruit the right professional team to complete that plan. So more to follow on that process, and hopefully some discussion about what cultural or architectural preservation efforts the communities may want in the future, and we'll make sure that the commission is apprised of that.
So Nat, I have a question about Saturday. So Britton did reach out to me and let me know that y'all are looking for some volunteers. If you're about to get to that, I don't know if any other commissioners want to. I am planning to join. I don't know where we're meeting. Hopefully we'll get some instruction on that.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing that up. And I'm going to take a little bit of a longer answer to that. And I hope it's not to, I want to be direct with you. We are working very hard to make sure that this is a neighborhood driven plan, and that the input and that the neighborhood representatives have a seat at driving the outcomes of this project. And so we are being careful to ask them about how it's organized and executed. And one of the questions we asked tonight was, are you open to having outside volunteers at this juncture? And so I'm waiting for some feedback on that. I know I shared last meeting that we were looking for some volunteers. I think that was me being overzealous a little bit and trying to get some effort going for the neighborhood. So I hope that there's opportunities in the future, but we did decide we were going to ask the neighborhood how they wanted to handle volunteers going forward. So I owe you some feedback from that. I'm happy to email the commission after I hear back from Sophia and Susan tonight, just to share what we heard from the neighborhood.
Okay, so is that the plan is the neighborhood and staff will be handling Saturday morning?
That's I expect that to be the answer, but we were going to check with the neighborhood tonight.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other updates or things we need to cover?
Britton, do you have any announcements that you want to share? I guess the guidelines, if you want to give them an update or want me to.
Not on the guidelines, since we really don't quite have an update yet. But I would like to let y'all know that Tuesday Talks with Britton and Ann is coming back on the first Tuesday of September. Ann Evans, who is one of our reference librarians, and I have what I've lovingly deemed our own podcast. And so if you go to historic.georgetown.org, there is a link for the meeting at noon on the first Tuesday of September. This will be the first Tuesday of every month. And in September, we are doing our back to school special. But really, we're showing a lot of photos and telling some pretty bizarre stories about the history of schools. And we're focusing on the school building, but we're also talking about some of the important people. And this includes schools that we still have with us today and also schools that we do not. And so there have been a number of school buildings that have been torn down over the years, and we're going to try to highlight some histories that we're not sure most of our community is aware of. And so hopefully have some fun doing that. And then Anne has promised me that she has a story about a rat infestation. And then she also has a story that the schools in Georgetown did close during the 1918 Spanish flu pandemic. Not very unlike what we're dealing with now, except they did not have a virtual learning option. And so if you have time to join us for that, we'd love to have you on our podcast, but we also record those and post them later. So if you go to historic.georgetown.org, you can see links right up there at the top of the page. And we're really thrilled to be able to share history and hopefully get more people on board with our preservation and how much we love our town and the very special place that Georgetown is.
Brittany, if I had anything to say, I would say it appears you have found your niche.
I could not be happier. I tell people all the time, and I told somebody today, I really, really love my job. And then getting to do this and getting to partner with Anne, who's so very knowledgeable, we just have the best time and hope that everybody else does too.
Simply great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Britton and Nat. We appreciate all you do for us. And thank you, commissioners, for continuing to make this process move forward. I think we've gotten the hang of it. I'm not sure I'm going to know what to do on the dais, but hopefully we'll get back there eventually. But thank you for hanging with us and making this process continue for our community. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All right, I have a motion to adjourn by Commissioner Johnston. Second.
Morales, second.
Second by Catherine Morales. I will take a vote. Commissioner Parr, yes. Commissioner Hyde,
Yes.
Commissioner Curry,
Yes.
Commissioner Johnston,
Yes.
Commissioner Morales,
Yes.
Commissioner Browner,
Yes, yes.
and Commissioner Mitchell.
Yes.
Thank you all very much. Y'all have a great evening. We'll see y'all in a couple weeks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank y'all.
Bye.